Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for turning up early for our first session today. I'm very pleased that we have Nicola Shindler here from Red this morning to talk to us. The idea with this session is that it's as interactive as possible, and it gives you all the chance to ask any questions that you have that can help you in putting together better scripts, pitching these to the right companies and getting your program ideas made. We do have people at the back with microphones, so we'll stop regularly in the discussion. If you'd like to raise your hand to ask any questions. So the idea this morning, the session is entitled "Developing Successful Scripts for TV." So really, we want to look at how you go about putting scripts together. What is the process that you go through? What are the sorts of ideas that people are looking for? And so we thought we'd start with really just finding out from Nicola what her original background was, obviously coming from a program side, getting involved on the script side, and then borrow on from your expertise in what sort of ideas you're looking for. So I guess the first question is, can you just give us a bit of background for those of people who are not already aware of where your experience came from?
I set up Red in 1998, and before that I'd been a producer and a script editor. After university, I worked at the Royal Court Theatre because I knew it was a home of new writing, and I was always interested in writing and drama and working with writers, and I made my way in the Royal Court from the sales department, which was literally stuffing leaflets and envelopes, to getting involved in the scripts. I read scripts for them that were being submitted, and I went to see a lot of fringe theatre and report back on fringe theatre. And that successfully put me off working in the theatre for life. So I spoke to people about television, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work with writers, and speaking to an agent, a literary agent, he told me that the job that I was talking about was script editing, which I didn't even know existed really. And script editing is absolutely sitting with the writer, working with the writer from idea through development, through production. It was everything that I wanted to do. So I was very lucky when I applied for a job as a script editor that I wasn't qualified for. I got a job as a trainee script editor at the BBC and began working that way on scripts, read all their scripts that were just backed up for years and years, cleared that, and sort of got myself a reputation as being good with scripts and being able to work hard. And from that I moved to Granada to work as a script editor on Cracker, the first series of Cracker up here, and then went back to the BBC to work on Our Friends in the North, which was such a big job. It was a 9-part series a long time ago now, that I became assistant producer on that, and then the next job I did was as producer on the drama documentary Hillsborough, which was back for Granada, so I was back up here. After a couple of years more working for Granada, I just wanted to set up my own company. I wanted to only make the things that I wanted to work on. It was a great time. I had no responsibilities. It didn't matter if it failed. I knew I could always go back to doing what I was doing. But very quickly, we went from nothing to making Queer as Folk within about 3 or 4 months. At the time, it was just me, Andrew Critchley, he's our managing director, and actually Tom Sherry, who's here now, and that was it. There was the 3 of us, and we just, we were all doing very different jobs, but set up from that. And I was lucky again with Red in that because we were making something that was quite standout quite early, we attracted a lot of attention and a lot of writers wanted to work with us. And I think the whole process of Red has been about making writers feel like this is the best place for them. They bring us the best ideas, and then we work from there to make them the best programmes that they can be. But absolutely with the script at the centre of that.
So in terms of, you mentioned in your early career you were doing a lot of reading, obviously really understanding how people are writing, getting experience and knowledge of understanding what's out there. That's obviously a key issue in sort of building up your knowledge.
Reading's interesting because I was literally reading. The BBC has an obligation as part of its charter to respond to everyone who sends stuff to them, but they hadn't done it for 10 years. So I was led down into a basement, literally, and there was just piles of scripts that were everywhere that no one had bothered. And to me it was a brilliant education, because the key thing about all of this is there is no right and there's no wrong. Just because I like a script or don't like a script doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It means that that's my taste and my opinion. And what I learned to do by reading so many scripts, many of which were written by people who just weren't writers, is to sort of understand what makes something jump out at me, what keeps me engaged with a story. I've got a weird thing as well, where however bad a script is, I have to read it to the end. It's something about needing to know about story that I've always read everything right to the end. And I think the process of reading and that year spent in that cellar really did teach me a lot about what I think makes something stand out and what makes something producible, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned what would be producible. I mean, from your experience, obviously putting programs together, are there any sort of key hurdles or areas where scripts fall down in terms of the production side, where you've just said this just won't work? You know, is that something that happens often, that people will just come up with something that's too fantastic or too expensive? Or
it depends on the process,
side?
Because it's very unlikely that someone who sends us a script, however amazing they are as a writer, that script will get made. So really, I would say don't not put anything in, if that makes sense. Put everything in, make it as big as you want, make it as small as you want, make it extraordinary, make it unfilmable, but write something in your voice that you believe in, because in the first instance, getting a script noticed is about having a really strong authorial voice, telling a really good story, having a wit, a tone about it that's attractive, and it doesn't matter about the content because you're unlikely to get that script made anyway.
Right.
For us as a company, if we like a script from a writer who's got no experience, we would then work with them on ideas which which could possibly get made, or direct them towards soap operas that take on writers. That means they'll get credits. There's lots of ways of doing it. It's unlikely that your first script is that brilliant that it will get made. It's just a fact. But you still got to do that first script to start working and to get the attention.
Yeah. So essentially, put all your dreams and your ideas in, regardless, because
absolutely,
at least there'll be something in there that might catch the attention or might be pulled out.
Yeah.
My question is, were there any of those scripts that had been sitting in that BBC basement that you did blow the dust off and resurrect? What proportion of those? Is there still hope for people who've sent that script out into the ether that it might one day be discovered in a dusty folder in a basement?
Out of a year's worth of writing, there's one writer who's still writing now, who we found in that. Actually, a woman in Manchester, but no, most of them were no good. Most of them were just, or for me, were not readable. Or a lot of scripts, first scripts, are all very personal, and they're about coming of age stories. I remember just reading hundreds of 18-year-old boys' stories about how hard life was and everything. And it's fine, but unless they had that wit, that voice, that way of telling story, then it's just a piece of writing. Again, like I say, other people might really like them, but no, we only found one person out of that pile. But I mean, that's still good.
Yeah, one good script out. Yeah, from that is a great idea. So, first scripts, then obviously very, very personal. Any particular genres or anything that you think that we're missing that would be really stand out? I mean, obviously, there's so much content out there now. There are so many different formats. You've obviously been doing a lot of excellent drama, and Scott and Bailey's fantastic on the crime side of things. Any particular areas of programming that you think are lacking good scripts, whether it's sitcom or any areas where you think people...
No, I don't think it kind of works like that. I think if you're a very experienced writer, and it's really hard because I don't know who I'm talking to, so if any of you are really experienced writers who have done it a lot, then I apologise. I'm kind of guessing that isn't the case, that you're not yet getting going, and that's why you're sat here. Therefore, if it's about first scripts, then I just think you should be writing, or not first scripts, but early scripts, or getting yourself noticed. You'd be writing what you passionately believe in, what you love, what represents you the best, rather than thinking there isn't a medical drama on ITV at the moment, because that slot is most likely to be filled by someone who's been writing telly for 20 years. So that isn't the best way to serve yourself.
Yeah.
Also, I think... ideas can be as simple and tiny, as anything, because Scott and Bailey is just two women working the police in Manchester. It's the way that Sally writes it, it's the tone she's got, it's the atmosphere she's given it, it's the characters' voices, it's the humour that she manages to put into it. That's what makes a tiny idea stand apart. So what's kind of pointless is when people send us a 3 or 4 line idea and say, I've got this great idea. Do you want to meet me? Do you want the script? Because in a way, unless we know your writing, then we don't know whether we want that idea or not, because it could be, any idea could be brilliant and could be terrible. So I think it's about actually writing rather than just treatments and ideas.
Maybe we should just do a quick show of hands in the audience just to see, if there are any, are there any experienced script writers in the room that have had their scripts made or programmes made? Show of hands, handful of people. People who've written kind of first scripts that they've sent out into the BBC basement. One out there, hoping that it will turn up. No, people on the production side more, programme makers. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense with BVE. So I guess at this stage, are there any particular questions that you'd like to throw out there in the audience? There's one question down at the front.
I had just one question about, you were speaking about the theatre and how much you've learned, through the theatre. And I was just wondering, what exactly did you bring with, because very often people, I teach in a university, and people very often forget the link between TV and theatre. And they think, oh no, I want to be on TV, And just how much it was, what was really useful in reading theatre, watching French plays, because you mentioned the French plays.
I think being at the Royal Court was really useful, because there was a whole, and I think there still is, or it's come back definitely, there was a whole feeling about we're breaking new ground, we're going to be as provocative as we can be, we are going to put on plays that no one else would do. It's West End, but it's not West End. They wanted to give voices that aren't often in the theatre. It was where Look Back in Anger was put on. It's always been the place for more working class voices in the theatre, which is rare. So that kind of taught me to have ambition, to look elsewhere, to not just go for the people who are around all the time. And also that edginess. There was always an edginess. There was always a lack of fear of shocking people, of saying things that were unsaid in other places. I think that I learnt that from there. On the negative side, I also think I learnt that most plays don't have enough discipline in the writing of them. They're not edited well enough. There's a lot of talking, which is obviously the case. But it wasn't in the end, theatre isn't my genre at all, because I just want the story to get on. And actually they want to have beautiful language. And in the end, it's what your taste is. But I did think I learnt about embracing the different.
So what was your favourite project that you've worked on so far? I mean, is it possible to...
No, it's like your children. You can't say what your favourite one is, apart from the fact that writers... No,
yeah.
I love them all. Whatever I'm working on right that second, I absolutely love. Some I hate, but I'm never going to say.
Yeah, okay. I suppose it depends on, a great idea and how much editing it needs and coaxing. Have you ever, again, without naming any names, I imagine that dynamic can occasionally be tricky between the writer and the editor, and particularly getting writers involved in the production, having writers on sets. I mean, I know on the film side of it, that's often very tricky. I mean, what's your view on how you manage that?
I think it is a tricky relationship, because when a writer gives you their script, they're like giving you their soul. They put so much into it, they care so much, and my job is to both say that's great, but also say how it could be better, and that's really hard for people to take. There's a real tension with writers the whole time. But when they respect you, and the key is that they know you're never going to give a note for the sake of giving a note. And I think a lot of people who work in telly do that. They just keep giving notes because they think that's their job. Whereas actually, I think the brilliant thing is to be able to go, this is brilliant, it doesn't need me. And once they know that you'll do that, so everything you're saying is only because you really believe it, then they trust you a lot more. And they want your opinion on their script, and they want to know certain things. So I think that's how you end up with a good relationship with writers. And then in terms of putting them at the centre of production, it was really unusual, actually. When we started doing it, writers they wrote their 1 hour script and they left the whole process. But it just became, first of all, the first writer I worked with at Red was Russell T Davies, who is a natural producer anyway. So there was no chance that he was going to walk away. And also, I didn't know much about Manchester's gay nightlife, and he knew everything. So there was no point in me not asking him. I didn't understand that. So I produced that first series of Queer as Folk, but he sat next to me on every stage of the way, and we talked about design, we talked about costume. And again, people stop being threatened when they realise that the person who's talking knows what they're saying. So, then I realised I wanted Russell to watch every single day's worth of rushes if he wasn't on set, because he needs to see it, he needs to judge it, he needs to say if we've got something wrong at script stage. I'm doing that as well, but he's the original source. And also, someone like him who's not scared of production means that you can react to what you're seeing. So if we think an actor's not working, then you can pull back in the later scripts. Or if you think someone's going to steal the show, then give them more to do. So to me, having the writer is a no-brainer, absolutely. And also in the edit, which directors find hard, but they've often written things for a reason, and a director will cut it for a different reason. And story is the most important thing on telly. So I think in the end you have to go with what the writer wants, almost always.
Because you were talking about obviously watching the character's development as what works well, or someone might be in danger of stealing the show. I guess if you've got a longer running series, that must be something you need to consistently take hold of. That. And again, I could imagine that would be tricky. Is that obviously you've sent out your children into the world, and you may think, oh no, I can't bear Dirty Den, and yet everyone thinks he's brilliant, but we've got to write more stories in for that. I mean, that must be a sort of a creative challenge, and again, commercial issues, I'm sure as well. It takes on a life of its own.
But most commercial issues, they're over-exaggerated really, because the people who are investing in your programmes want them to sell. But you do as well. And also, therefore, they want them good. So it's very rare that we've been asked to do something which I absolutely don't agree with creatively, because often the people who are pushing you are just wanting it to be better. Yeah. So there's a lot of conflict with broadcasters at time if they say, we don't want you to cast that person because they're not a name, they're not interesting enough, whatever it is. Sometimes that's horrific and you can fight it. Other times, you also want to bring an audience, so they might be right. It's kind of like just accepting that you need to listen to those people. Yeah. In terms of characters and developing them, Scott and Bailey is a case in point, because it was all about Scott and Bailey in series 1, and Sally and I would watch the rushes, and we just love what the actress Amelia Bullmore was doing, who plays their boss. She was just great, and she just made it so much better. So we did take away anything from Scott and Bailey, but we kept increasing her role in it. Yeah. And I think that's really appealed to people. And she's just a fantastic, very funny character. So that's really helped. And this series even more so. Yeah.
Yeah, there was an episode I was watching recently where it was really focused on the two of them.
Yeah.
And that relationship. And I thought, having watched the series, that was a really interesting development. You think, oh, well, yeah, she always thought she was interesting and liked to find out more about their backstory. And I suppose that's something that you can... It must be really enjoyable to be a writer and to be able to say, do you know what, I'm going to investigate this person a lot more. And I suppose
long-running series are hard as well, though, because you don't want to play the same beat with the characters each time, but you want to be truthful to the characters. So you try and bring in new things, and you have to be aware of the fact that this character does mess everything up. That's just who she is. You can't change her just because you don't want to repeat yourself. So it's a challenge, but a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So are there any more questions from the audience at this stage? There's one at the back there.
Hi, I think writers are always interested in process. So do you have any advice on best process that you've seen writers use to get from good characters to good story?
I don't quite know what you mean by process, sorry.
I mean writing process.
Right. Well, no, everyone writes in their own individual way. I would recommend heavily that everyone reads television scripts. And these days there are websites that have got massive amount of television scripts on. So think about what you love and then get hold of a script. And actually, for writers, it's such a brilliant thing to see how someone has put that down. And I think you understand that process a lot more if you look at those ones that you admire, and then you think about your own story and your own characters and how can you do that. The good ones are always try and be surprising. They tell story in an original way. They never let you settle. It's not that you can't have a 5-page scene. In the thing we've made, which goes out next Tuesday, which everyone has to watch, called Last Tango in Halifax, that is actually substantially massive scenes, but still it feels like the story's moving on the whole time because it's surprising. The characters respond in a surprising way. I think the only thing you can say is be completely truthful to yourself and to the idea that you want, but tell it in the most interesting way. And I do think reading other scripts is very important.
Hello. How do you find a good script editor? What do you look for?
Again, because it's all so subjective, someone who's got the same taste as you. Because actually, someone else could come in and say, I love whatever that I don't like, and that doesn't make them wrong again, but it's just that we're not going to go for the same things. So we talk about what television they watch, and what they liked about that television, and I give them scripts of ours and say, how would you make this better? And then they break down how they'd make it better. And either it's going to be exactly what we would do, or it's not really. So it's quite straightforward in a way. And also they have to, I think as a script editor, you have to be able to talk to people. I know some script editors who are just such cold fishes that writers find it very difficult and they don't know whether they're getting the encouragement. So you have to be willing to sit in a room with someone for 6 hours and work on a story and work on a script and all those things.
I guess in lots of ways that's knowing the industry, knowing who's making what types of programmes. So I suppose it's a lot of, networking and researching. Again, I suppose on the pitching side, it's thinking, well, I can see the sorts of programmes that Red has been making.
Yeah. And no, I think that's so key, is that you look at the end credits and you understand who's made those programmes, and you work out what those companies like. Companies do have a style without meaning to. We have a company style that we never set out to do, but it's just there. So look at them. If you feel that your taste is similar to that company, then send it there and compliment them on their work, not in a creepy way, but in a, I understand what you're making and why you're making it, and this is what I want to do. So then they get that it's about, you understand their take on it.
Are there any kind of networking opportunities, or sort of, talking about, complimenting people on what they do? Are there any areas that sort of, whether it's, workshops or I know that BAFTA do, script writing, places like that. Are they useful from a networking perspective for people starting out?
I'm like the last person you should ask about networking. It makes me want to die and crawl up and go under my duvet. Because to me, it's not about who you're chatting to and what you're saying and where you're seen. It's about the work you do. So if you're a writer, then just give us a good script rather than chat to me over a glass. I can't do that. So I don't think that's as important as just putting in the work and you're by yourself, writing, rewriting, throwing away a script because it's not good enough, writing another one. That's what gets you work, not chatting. Certainly not with our company anyway. In terms of writers' training, I do think it's important to say, and it sounds really cruel, that some people are writers and some people aren't. So I'm kind of dubious about courses, because I don't think you can teach someone to be a writer. You can encourage them and pull their work out and push them in the right direction and suggest that they do things. So I guess some of the courses do those things. The BBC Writers' Room, which is based up here, is really strong and good for new writers. I don't think BAFTA do anything beyond talks. I don't know of any courses for new writers. Do you? No, we don't know.
I suppose that's what comes into the question at the back, the process, the discipline. As you say, if you're just writing, setting aside the time, reading, doing a lot of research, because there's a lot of talk about inspiration, where you get your inspiration from, and whether it's, the Yellow Pages or something that you've seen in the street. I suppose capturing that, having the discipline to actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely, and hard work. We get sent a lot of scripts, and Freya, who's here, reads most of them, so she could say what, in presentation terms, what stands out. But what clearly stands out is if you've worked on it. So, like Russell or Sally Wainwright, or these writers who've got a big name, who get a lot of stuff made, they give us a draft 1, which is like most people's draft 6, because they're so thorough. They ask themselves every question. They correct it. They make sure the voice is exactly right. There are no spelling mistakes. As silly as that sounds, I can't even see spelling mistakes. But, they've really, really worked hard at this process, just like a producer has to work hard. They don't think just because they're sat at home and they can have this morning on, it's an easy job. It's really, really tough, and they're writing all the time. So when you talk about inspiration, most writers, most writers I know who are writers in their blood have got stories in their head constantly, and in fact they're being talked to constantly, and they're a little crazy, really.
So yeah, presentation
Yeah.
skills is a must for getting something noticed. Or
I
or
do
not.
think you should ask Freya that, because I don't see those scripts.
Are there any comments that you would like to add, Freya, on that? Can we have the microphone down the front, please? So I imagine if you're confronted with a massive pile of scripts, it would be great to just hear how you actually, your process from...
I mean, I read them all, and they all get read. I think you do notice something that looks nice, as in that everything's in order. You get a letter that accompanies it, which explains it. I struggle with, as Nicola mentioned earlier, with just an idea.
Right.
We can't do anything with an idea. Presentation, I'm trying to think what else I would look for. Well, the thing that Nicola said about spelling, I think the other thing to look out for is when you change a character's name in the middle of a story. And you don't know where you're going.
Did everyone hear that? The microphones are both. So, getting something that looks good, that has a covering letter, essentially like a CV, really, isn't it? That's fully developed rather than just an idea, and not that changing the character's name halfway through a story.
Yeah, and the reason I say read scripts is so you know how to literally lay them out on the page. Because sometimes we get ones which are just all constant that you can't really read, can you? So there is a format, a really easy, straightforward format to how a script should look that you should copy. Because that's what, and if you're getting 20 scripts a week, then it does need to stand out in that way.
And going back to what Nicola said at the beginning, is it doesn't actually matter what that story is. I will keep going even if I don't like the story, if the dialogue is smart, if the characters are fun, or I want to spend time with them. So again, I'm not looking at the story only. It's just part of it.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? So I guess another question for me is there any program or script that you wish that you'd worked on or written, in any sort of,
Well,
whether
I don't
it's
write.
The Wire or anything,
Oh no, I can't bear The Wire. Bores me to death. I don't write, but I guess my favourite programmes in the world are, really obvious. The Sopranos, The West Wing. Those are the two top for me. ER was one of my favourites ever. Really different tones, but just so well written, such interesting characters, constantly surprising, really pacey storytelling, episodes which would just do something completely different, not afraid to throw in, extreme stories, not cleverness, but a wit about them. Because we keep saying wit and entertaining and everything. However dark a script is, really good writers still make it, like in life, people will, not make jokes at their darkest time, but they'll have a survivability about them. If something is just relentlessly miserable, then it's quite hard to think that it will get on screen, however beautifully it's written. I think there's a man there.
Sorry, they were all American shows that you mentioned then. So is there a kind of difference in the way that the approach from the Americans to the British? Is that makes it better? Or
there are brilliant
different?
British programmes, I just can't think of them right now. But I watch telly now. It is kind of like, I love it, but I'm watching it for a work point of view. So if I'm watching a drama made by another company, it's really rare that I get whisked away, because I'll be looking at the quality of the writing, the directing, the acting. I'll be seeing if we should be working with any of those people. I'll be trying to judge it really harshly. And it's hard to judge it. But there are ones, I'm trying to think. I love Spooks. That was one that I watched for 9 years and just could watch because it really washed over me. I think Fresh Meat that's on at the moment is just fantastic to watch. It's so well written. It has all those things we said, which is brilliantly believable characters, but really extreme, quite edgy. I'm trying to think what else I love that's on at the moment. I liked Black Mirror. I like the first one of Black Mirror. I only saw that recently. It's a year old now, but there are things that really stand out. Hello.
Who are the standout scriptwriters for you, and what is it about their work that you admire? British ones, ideally.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky that I work with most of the ones I really admire. So, like I said, that's Sally I'm working with a lot at the moment. A writer called Danny Brocklehurst, who I've worked with a lot. Russell T. Davis. There are other ones who I haven't worked with, like Pete Bowker, who's written Monroe, that's on at the moment, which is so well written. there are people who do things that I would never do. Like, I can admire the way Andrew Davis adapts things. I'd never want to work on them, or that's not my voice, but I think he's amazing. Writers like Abby Morgan, who, Sex Traffic is one of the best things that was ever on telly. What attracts me to them all, more simply rather than just a list of names, is that they have a really strong voice, which I keep using that word, but they've got something to say. It's not bland. You can read a script and think, I don't know who wrote that, and I don't know the difference between those characters. They've all got really strong ways of storytelling. They all have their own pace and their own energy. And again, they are very thorough, so they are trying to tell stories in a surprising way. Not like to reinvent the boat for the sake of it, but just that you need to grip people. So you can be telling a story like Last Tango in Halifax, which is just about a family and relationships, but it's the way you tell that story. It's whether you jump around in time, it's whether you have people see scenes from different points of view. It's not tricks, it's entirely done with truth, but it's always about moving a story on in an interesting way, and all of those writers do that. And I think when I read their scripts, I feel like they're burning to tell me that story. If someone's half-hearted about what they're writing, you can tell.
Any more questions? Oh, there's one at the back there.
I was just wondering what approach to take with how I'm writing. I've got two stories.
Sorry, what approach to take with what?
With what I'm aiming to write, because I've got two stories which maybe I'm too passionate about. They're both based on political situations. They're a lot of other people's stories that I've collected and researched. I've found two storylines to put it into, but it's looking more like a series than a feature film or a long drama. Should I just let that happen and then show it to somebody and let them go carve the things out that shouldn't be there?
You should just write it.
Just get
Yeah,
on
you
to
shouldn't
it.
think. I mean, you should think about structure in terms of story.
Yeah.
So you should make sure your story is going to be told in a way that can be understood if it's two different stories and in a really engaging way. But I don't think you should worry yourself about whether it's a serial, series, single, any of those things right now, because you've just got to get it on screen. And if it's brilliant and no one wants to make singles, then they'll turn it into a serial. Or if it's brilliant but no one wants to make serials, they'll find a way to put those characters into a series. It kind of like it's I think it's over talked about that you can write specifically for what people on telly want, apart from the fact it changes month to month. So we're constantly getting briefings where you do want a medical drama, you don't want a medical blah 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 blah, you do want three-parters, you don't want three-parters. So you just got to forget that and do something really good, and then it'll get made if it's good enough.
Who are the best comedy script writers that you admire?
Well, I guess the people who write Fresh Meat, which is Jesse Armstrong and I can't remember the name of the other one. Yeah, them. I think they're brilliant. I think Armando Iannucci and Tony Roach and all those people who write The Thick of It. God, sorry, I should have said The Thick of It. That is an absolute classic series. Steve Coogan. I thought those Mid-Morning Matters on Sky were absolute genius. All the obvious, really. I do think Charlie Higson is hilarious in a really dark way. I think Paul Whitehouse and Harry Enfield are still brilliant. So there's loads of different voices.
There's one more question there.
Hello. In terms of the kind of things that you get submitted, would you say, on the whole, you almost always want to work from a script rather than a detailed synopsis or a kind of story, a sort of script?
Yeah, because like we said, we can't. An idea is nothing without the writing behind it. So what we sometimes get is, here's my idea, it's brilliant, I can't give you the script in case you steal it, which is all very well, but then who's going to make it in your bedroom? So you just have to let go of your work and do the writing. But don't expect any favours. You have to have written your script, you have to have put that work in. I know it's really hard, people have got full-time jobs, but you have to give in a 60-page script or whatever it is before anyone can look at it. It's, we have to know whether you can do it or not.
Is there any advice on that for people who are concerned about having their ideas stolen? I mean, people are always asking about protecting their IP at this show. I mean, is it just simply a question of just copying everything that you send to anyone and sending it to yourself at the same time, just in case you're paranoid that...
Yeah, you can do that, and you can make a list of who you send to when. But I think it is so rare that anyone's going to want to steal anything from anyone. I do think it's an absolute paranoia. Ideas that are very similar and are developed at the same time, it happens all the time. If you think about whether it's films that, two films about the same subject come out at the same time, or television programmes that are really near to each other, they're not copied necessarily. Ideas are out there. There's 5-6 stories in the world anyway, so just don't be paranoid. If you're good, then you'll get through.
Yeah.
I can't think of any production company I know, even the ones I don't like, who would steal an idea from someone. But I have been accused of it. Oh. Having said that.
But I suppose that's it, isn't it? As you've both been saying, that actually it's the voice, it's the authorial voice, it's the way that you communicate those characters, boy meets girl, blah, 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 it's the same story. So actually it's your identity as a writer that will carry that through and make the difference, make it witty, charming, successful, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? There's one over there.
Hi. I was just wondering, we're talking about script writing. I had to make a little fiction story for college, and the things were limited with what I could do. So I've got something that could be shown, but actually hasn't got a script. Well, it has got a script, obviously, but would it be that if the film was submitted to a production company, that they would be able to see that and see how the script could be developed?
Yeah, we've done that, haven't we? Yeah, we are sent short films and things and said, consider me as a writer. But you have to remember then we can't help but judge everything else about it as well. So it might be better to send the original script if you only want your work judged. We'll look at you can't help but be influenced by how well acted it is, how well your dialogue is spoken, all those things. So we will look at that, but if it's a script, it's probably a cleaner way of getting yourself judged.
Any more questions out there? Well, I think we're running to time anyway, so I suppose just a few takeaways from the session is, read as much as possible, research as much as possible, work really hard on your ideas, make sure that there's more than, it could be the idea or the story doesn't necessarily have to be the big thing. It's really who you are as a writer and how you communicate that, and then make sure you deliver it and present it in an acceptable, well-presented manner to the right type of company that's likely to find
and research who that company is.
Research, yeah. Brilliant, lovely. Any final comments?
No, I don't think so. Just good luck.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicola. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.